George Soros decided to purchase Dieza.
How much do you think George Soros is involved here in Texas?
George Soros funded their opponents to take out Democrats who were prosecuted.
Soros money went towards to defund the police movement.
Affiliates who are getting money from the Soros-occupied State Department.
George Soros.
George Soros.
George Soros. Is he aware that his money is being used to destroy America?
I wouldn't just say America, I would say the West. Western civilization is his target.
George Soros, a paradoxical man, world's greatest investor, a philanthropist, and a public enemy. Give him a name. Moses. A Moses for the migrants in Europe and the US? Judas. A Judas for the Jewish world. Or can be seen as the ancient serpent at the Eden Garden might be the one. I just don't know. I leave it to you. Such a paradox. Britain, which once reigned the world, met a man who broke its bank in just one day. This is a fascinating story of the world's greatest investor, a hedge fund legend who grabbed the greatest opportunity to legally pickpocket billions from the Bank of England and enforcing his vision to make a democratic world by being a dictator, calling himself a Democrat, yet undermining democracy. Apart from being the man behind the Black Wednesday of England, there is more to him than being in the financial sphere. Where do we start? From 1930, the year he was born, to a Jewish Hungarian upper-middle-class family, yet he grew up with his home walls stained with antisemitism. The family felt exceedingly repulsive to be identified with the Jewish. When Hungary was swallowed up by the Nazis, George Soros learned the art of survival from his grandmaster, his father, an advocate. Though Jewish, the entire family changed their identity for being a Christian. His father played to the Nazis that George was the godson of a collaborationist Hungarian government's Ministry of Agriculture. Few recall how George Soros, at the age of 13 to 14, survived the Nazi regime. He turned in his fellow Jews to the Nazis. He helped the Nazis catalog the Hungarian Jews' properties before impounding them, and let them walk to their deaths. This set the stage for his dual character, a sinister to the core and a philanthropist on the periphery. Times past the World War II, Soros attended the London School of Economics. Studying under reputed philosopher Karl Popper, Soros earned his pocket money by working as a porter and a waiter. This young man was bred and soared high in an economic realm after his first taste of money. But the question needs to be asked, why was Soros linked to Black Wednesday of England? That's just the window through which the entire world saw Soros, the sinister, for the first time. His subversive activities, too, came to the limelight, unfolding little by little. So what is Black Wednesday? Here is the haunting episode that happened to the Bank of England. Before the inception of the euro currency, the ERM, or exchange rate mechanism system, was in place for trading. The European currencies were linked at a fixed rate, efficiently balancing the oscillations in the exchange rates while doing business. Once any country is part of ERM, each day the nation becomes extremely observant of the exchange rates, closely monitoring and engaging rightly when exchange rates dribble or surge. When people line up to buy copiously, the banks would then start to peddle, and if the shareholders start to sell, then banks started to buy. Import and export businesses handle a significant amount of money, which indirectly and highly controls the actual exchange rates. Though the ERM system made business easier, all national banks did sleep with one eye open. Why? Because of its vulnerability. At the exchange rate, each country had its significant monetary value, and inflation and economic growth had to be balanced in parallel with the interest rates too. The ERM was faulty in this perspective. No one can control inflation and economic growth factors. The then Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, was aware of this faulty system. Hence, she was not for the ERM system for the pound man. Despite her trying to keep the pound country away from joining the ERM, she lost the battle to it. Britain was walking down the recession lane. Thatcher resigned, and John Major, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, took his seat as the PM, stating ERM was one of the flags that he holds for this victory. The British pound was already very weak, and the inflation rate soared 3 times higher than Germany's. As the recession was peaking, the Bank of England wanted to lower its interest rate, which would help to boost the economy. But this in turn would bring down the pound value in the ERM, and that would make the pound man leave the ERM system itself, which John Major was strongly against it. The British economy agonized for 2 years. Holding the interest rates high was insufficient to maintain the pound's value, so throughout these 2 years, the Bank of England would frequently go to the market and buy millions of pounds by holding up its foreign exchange savings in the declining scenario. But it was a frail effort, and the economy ship kept sinking. The pound kept sliding down, but within the ERM sphere. At this point, Soros was leading a hedge fund. He was silently spectating in prudence, charting the outcome. Circumspectly, Soros approached a huge bank or hedge fund, borrowed funds promising to repay them with good interest. Then, he traded the pounds for German marks in the foreign exchange, foreseeing that when the exchange rate drops, he would buy back the pounds cheaper, yet with earning the difference as the profit. By the end of that month, Soros had slyly risen to a position that was equivalent to $1.5 billion against the pound, whereas the position of the exchange rate had been scarcely altered. As all news was ranting and raving about the future economy, Soros patiently waited for indications to increase further his position in profits. On September 16th, the president of Bundesbank gave an interview saying, "Doesn't rule out that some currencies might come under pressure." These words sparked Soros. One can use this phrase right this moment about Soros. Veni vidi vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. This news brazenly armed him to take a big shot at the Bank of England. That very night, when entire Europe was fast asleep, Soros called up international banks, companies that had British pounds. He tried to borrow them with the Ceaseless Act. Before sunrise, Soros peddled $10 billion alike worth of pounds in the open market. Bank of England plunged into chaos. Britain woke up to a chaotic world. John Major made frantic steps to save the pound man. On September 17th, 9 a.m., Soros had purchased another £2 billion. He dialed John Major again, requesting to increase the rate, which Major declined, citing it would be a political suicide. But as Soros and the global currency market continued selling pounds, by 11 a.m., Major conceded, and Britain enormously increased its interest rates by 2%. At the end of the day, Britain had purchased £27 billion and had increased its interest rate a second time to 15%. But just Soros alone had sold about half as many pounds. By 7:30 p.m., the British government accepted defeat.
Today has been an extremely difficult and turbulent day. Massive speculative flows continued to disrupt the functioning of exchange rate mechanism.
The front pages are pictured and named Soros, the man who broke the Bank of England. A market day in London's financial markets ended with the Chancellor announcing that the pound was being suspended from the ERM, and that the second of the two dramatic interest rate rises during the day was after all cancelled. Massive speculations disordered the functioning of the exchange rate mechanism. The government had concluded that Britain's best interests are served by suspending their membership at the exchange rate mechanism. In the following days, the pound fell by 15% against the German mark, against the US dollar by 25%. Soros and his fund pocketed a nice $1 billion from their trade, while the estimated cost to the British taxpayer was over £3 billion. After this turbulence, the Bank of England was once again free to control the British pound, which it did, step by step. It cut interest rates, restored the British economy to high levels of growth. By the year 1997, the British pound became more valued than the ERM episode. UK economy started to successfully climb up for the next 16 consecutive years, so much so that some call that day White Wednesday. Is that all about Soros? A big no! Black Wednesday, White Wednesday? No, not at all. Let's go further. Why does his name pop up whenever a country is on the verge of crumbling? Why do politicians mention his name whenever their country faces a political crisis? George Soros is a persona non grata in most of the political and economic dominion. In 1999, Paul Krugman, the economist, mentioned, "Nobody who has read a business magazine in the last few years can be unaware that these days there really are investors who not only move money in anticipation of a currency crisis, but actually do their best to trigger that crisis for fun and profit. These new actors on the scene do not yet have a standard name. My proposed term is Soroi." Being a philosopher, he worked more as a philanthropist. He established the Open Society Foundation, which incessantly works and funds educational, human rights, and health projects in more than 120 countries around the world. Fervently advocating for migrant rights, Soros believes in open borders. Many perceive that Soros's immense affluence and influence helped to channel his vision across the globe. And all of his sub rosa plans were to overthrow governments to control European politics and the economy. His dynamic involvement in politics scales from the Pacific Ocean to the Siberia Mountains. Russia expelled his Open Society Foundation and Open Society Institute from functioning in their territory. 53 books related to Soros' renewal of humanitarian education program were excluded, along with 427 additional books that were torn to pieces in the Komi Republic region. The country felt his charities propagated a perverted perception of history and making ideological directives alien to Russian ideology popular, as given in a Russian intergovernmental letter. About China, Soros warns about their immense economic growth alongside technological advancement, cautioning about China's social credit system, otherwise called Big Brother, which is being implemented by them, would bring a massive country under a dictatorship. He considers China to be the perilous adversary of open societies. Arya Tuchman, associate director of the Anti-Defamation League, articulates that Soros reinforces in every way antisemitism, and this prosperous Jew controls world events, banks, Hollywood, media in any country for his perverse purposes. In Britain, where he banked his prize money, Soros opposed Brexit. It made headlines on the conservative-supporting newspaper, The Daily Telegraph, 2018. Sources claim that he funded voters to reverse the Brexit decision. He went to lengths by hosting dinner for conservative donors at his London home, luring them to fight to remain with the European Union. In October 2019, Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg, leader of the House of Commons, termed him as funder-in-chief for the Remain campaign of the Brexit. Open Society Foundation gifted £400,000 to the anti-Brexit campaign. The Independent writes that he is the man marching for the New World Order.
I think we underestimate who George Soros is. That Soros, in many ways, is the biggest danger to the entire Western world.
Nigel Farage, leader of the UK Independent Party and member of the European Union, says Soros is the biggest danger to the entire Western world. He quotes that we underestimate who George Soros is, that his foundation has already spent $15 billion.
Has already spent $15 billion in campaigning, and it's due to receive another $20 billion.
And yet to receive more for the campaign to undermine nation-states, democracy, and fundamentally change the demographics of the whole of the European continent. In his hometown Hungary, Soros disapproved of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's plan about the European migrant crisis in 2015. Soros, who propagates open borders as one of his central agendas, said Viktor Orbán plans to treat the protection of national borders as the objective and the refugees as an obstacle, whereas they treat the protection of refugees as the objective and national borders as the obstacle. Mr. Viktor Orbán, after winning his third term as Prime Minister, wanted to enforce much of the anti-migrant, nationalist, and culturally conservative agendas. Soros, being a liberal, left-wing supporter and who works for the migrants, found the Prime Minister's conflicting agenda oppressive. Hungary finally passed the debatable Stop Soros law, which comprised the punishment of up to a year in jail to people supporting illegal immigrants. Many articles claim that George Soros had been outfoxed by Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán, that open societies ceased operations in Hungary and moved their subversive operations to Berlin, a city well matched to Soros' Nazi collaboration background. In July 2020, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, called the 2018 Armenian Revolution was another provocation by Soros and his entourage, and called the government of the Armenian Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, the agents of the Soros Foundation. Aliyev stated that no traces of the Soros Foundation in Azerbaijan because it had cut off their legs, as they were poisoning the minds of youth, turning them against their state. In October 2020, during the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, Aliyev labeled Soros' activities a destructive movement and a colonial movement, and that Soros came to power in Armenia today, but failed. In January 2017, a profound initiative named Stop Operation Soros, SOS, was launched in Macedonia. It sought questions and answers about the way Soros operates worldwide, and invited researchers to contribute broadly on this. One of the founders of SOS, Nenad Mirsevsky, stated that SOS would work towards the de-Sorosization of Macedonia. Finally, Soros did even march into the world's most powerful country, the USA. Many senators claim Soros' force was much behind all elections since 2000. Soros claims that it is a matter of life and death, and central focus of life, of not letting George Bush be elected again. Hence, he dispersed more than $2 million to various organizations to support the Democrats' campaign in the 2004 election. He backed Hillary and Obama much for the elections and did smear a lot about the Trump team. More drama played with fake pipe bombs sent in mail packages to the home of Soros, Hillary, and former President Obama to spoil the Republic election campaign in 2018. Many news sources claim this stunt was to gain sympathy from the public, even though none of the bombs exploded, as it wasn't even constructed in the right way. Well, the other side of Soros' philanthropic acts are: he funded black students to attend the University of Cape Town in apartheid South Africa, and began funding dissident movements behind the Iron Curtain in the 1970s. In 1984 to 89, he played a major role in the peaceful transition in the governance of Hungary from communism to democracy. In more than 60 countries, Soros Open Society Foundation has active programs with total disbursements averaging $600 million a year. In July 2020, his foundations revealed their grants amount of $220 million for racial justice groups, criminal justice reform, and civic engagements. As of March 2020, Soros is the 162nd richest person in the world, with a net worth of $8.3 billion, stated by Forbes magazine. All of what was seen here is just a little of him, but there are more powerful events linked to his name. I leave it to your discretion to understand this man, George Soros, who through his foundations may be helping you too right now.